Welcome to the MMHP and the 989. Channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history from the city by the bay. And now, here's your host, Scott Baker.
We're back here, Studio 163 in Essexville on a interesting, rainy, wet, but windy and odd Michigan, total pure Michigan fall afternoon. We got Dr. J in the house. How's things going, Dr. J?
Well, pretty great.
This is beautiful. This
Yeah.
has been good. This has been a good week.
Yeah, it certainly
I've
has.
had some good news here, and the Rock Hall of Fame still moving along.
It is. We're already looking at a couple new exhibits, and so things are rocking, to say the least.
Man, and I know Freddie was been around town. How you doing, Sir Fred?
I'm doing real good.
You picking up some Czech polkas in Saginaw today?
Yes, I wasn't going to go because it was raining hard. And then I looked up ahead and it looked blue in Saginaw.
It was weird out, man.
So I said, hell with that. I'm going to go.
Uh-huh.
And by the time I got there, it wasn't raining. And I saw the picture online and I said, where is that room? Because I usually go in the basement first. And they weren't there. They were in a bedroom. But they were all Czech polka groups.
Well, where was this
And
place?
78s as well. And I got a bunch of them.
So it was a house that
Yep.
was having a...
Yeah, on Weiss.
Okay.
Over by Green Acres. By Kroger.
And he said the Czech Schwartz Creek Czech
Yeah.
polkas. Near Owaslo. Makes sense.
2 or 3 of them were from Swartz Creek, the
Interesting.
label.
Yeah. Oh. That sounds like a good afternoon for you, though, on your picking series here.
It was.
Yeah. Get you a little more
I
writing for your
don't
book.
need any more records, but I as I told the guy at the estate sale,
What?
I can't stop.
You can't. I remember I went into his apartment not too long ago, and it's like you got to open the door. You're pushing records back just to open the door. It's impressive. Mike Beatty's in the house. Mr. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
How's Neil Young doing today? Is he doing okay?
He's doing great.
Is he?
Yeah.
Did you? I know you talked to Robert Fripp last week. You get to almost talk to Neil Young this week.
I sent him a message.
Okay.
We were taking messages by like text, and they then asked my question, which was
The Saginaw?
You suggested, what do you remember about rehearsing in Saginaw with CSNY?
Yeah, I thought that'd be plausible for a good question.
So anyway, it was very cool. He talked about a lot of stuff. I got video of it. Some of it I put up already. And
Our archivist has already bootlegged it. This is good. This is good. We got it all.
Well,
in there.
your message, if they answer it, will it come up later?
No,
Oh,
I don't think so. No.
It'd be cool if he answers it somewhere down the line though in his archive series. So, but
And you can ask questions on, not only the Zoom meetings with him, but on his archives website,
right.
which I've done that before, and no responses yet.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, he does respond.
Wonderful. Well, Neil Young 1 week, Robert Fripp the last. I mean, shit's going pretty good, Mike. I don't know how you do this. Walk barefoot into the house and people feed you. I don't know. It's beautiful. We got a really special guest in the house. This is a really cool event. We've had some brilliant authors outside of our own Sir Fred here and Dr. J. And as a writer myself, it doesn't get much cooler than this. And ripped right out of the pages of Detroit. You want to talk about fishing through the microfiche like we had in our first bumpers back in the day. Mr. John Cohassey's in the house. How you doing, John?
Fine. Yeah.
John's an author of a great Detroit deep blues book from the beginnings, among other things. And I also noticed, which really I thought was really unique, is you got to be in the Metro Times for these pieces, but you had to write your own story.
Oh, yeah.
It happens up here too, man. They're like, "Oh, you're having a gig? Can you write a story about it, Scott?" It's like, oh, yeah, isn't that typical?
Yeah. It didn't happen very often.
No, I enjoyed back looking on the web though and checking everything out. If you want to sit back here and get on that mic, we can get you in here. So take us back to your writing, John. I mean, what was it? All music and writing, or where did you begin with the pen?
Oh, when I stopped playing, I met a guy at Oakland University. He said, try to write for Gale Research. They need people for their music book, and contemporary musicians, and then I wrote for Contemporary Black Biography, and ended up doing like 50 or 60 of them. And then,
Did you?
Yeah, because I got it in good with them, and then I wrote about everybody that I liked because they were running out of people. So I pitched somebody like Paul Chambers, and they would go, "Oh, who's that?" And I'd tell them about him. Go ahead. So I got to do all the Detroit people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so then when I graduated from Wayne with my master's degree, it was down on Hastings Street. It was a study of that whole East Side area, the blues and the jazz, the difference between the two, and how the community supported it economically, bars, scene. And so when that came out, a friend of mine said, "Well, you got to meet Sonny Wilson, who had the Forest Club at Forest and Hastings." And it was a big, giant, old entertainment complex that he leased from 41 to 51. And he was still alive, and he was in his 80s. We don't know how old he was. He said he was born in 1908, but a lot of his friends said they thought he was older even.
Mm-hmm.
But I met him, and my friend introduced me to him at Carl's Chalk House, and I didn't know that he was looking for an author. And he looked me up and down and got recommendations, and by the time lunch was done, he goes, "You want to write my story?" And he pulls out this picture of he and Joe Louis during the championship at Joe Louis's Chicken Shack, and said, "Here I am, young guy." Well, Sonny was the youngest of the entrepreneurs. He was like in 30s, early 30s, where all the other guys were 50s and 60s, and so I knew that even the Joe Louis connection, him being a buddy of his and stuff like that, would be a great chapter. It'd sell the book anyway. Mm-hmm. There's not enough about Joe.
But before you move ahead,
Yeah.
What year did you put the guitars down or the music down and graduate? When is this?
Oh, I basically stopped around 1990 and graduated in 93.
So we're talking about this, your research began and your writing began in the early 90s here.
Yeah, and then the book came out. Sonny's book took 4 years, but I went...
Details.
Yeah, because we wanted to take it really seriously. He didn't remember the dates. He'd say, like, was it before the war? And he'd say, "John, what war? I've been through a lot of them, Mm-hmm. So I would go and look up, the mm-hmm. dates and stuff. Because he was in the Michigan Chronicle, which we were just talking with you guys earlier, the black newspaper. Mm-hmm. Sonny was well enough known that I could go and find him in the gossip columns. And the ads that had his name, and I got the years going through that laboriously, and I loved it. Fred was saying it'll make your head spin going through all those ads, but that's what I would do almost the whole day, and I'd take a break, and I would feel ill coming out of it. I go back a couple days a week and just sit right through those. So everything I got was pretty much, I got the dates and that. Wonderful. And so that book dealt with, more than that. Was like a chapter in Idlewild up north. That's another whole story. Mm-hmm. And I went up there and met people through him. And but it followed his as an entrepreneur. He used to dance a little bit and all that, but he made friends with Joe. And then he ran all these nightclubs until he had his own big one. And then he'd meet all the celebrities would come to him because he knew where to go at night around the East Side, which we're going to get to in a minute. The thing is, between the master's thesis and Sonny's book, I got to know through Sonny's older friends and everything, the layout of the East Side and where the music really was and where the neighborhoods were and who really had clubs, and because there really was distinctive areas on the old East Side, east of Woodward. Hastings we'll talk about in a minute, north and south, mm-hmm. Where the freeway went through, and then Paradise Valley was down St. Antoine and Adams. It was clustered around there. That was a totally different kind of spot. It was entertainment, but that was a place that tried to imitate Chicago or New York. The clubs weren't huge, but they had stage show, and they had the gals would come out and do their walkthroughs with their gowns on, MC, dinner. They'd have dinner, mm-hmm. offer dinner, and then you'd have jump blues or, like more of a swing type, smaller units, okay? So Paradise Valley had, and it doesn't have any exact boundaries, but we can talk about it later. Okay, and then you had Black Bottom, which was below that all the way to the river, and that was residential neighborhoods. It didn't have music. It had people that grew up there like Kenny Burrell and Yusef Lateef and people like that.
They were in Black Bottom.
They grew up there and as young men, mm-hmm. But there wasn't music there. And people forget there's the good time people, the night people, and there were the family people. And I talked to a lot of older black folks, they'd say, "Oh, my dad and mom, they went to church, they went to bed and went to work. Those are the nighttime. That was my uncle did that. You know, he wandered off or did that." So they were all, and some of them went, went and listened to gospel and sang gospel. It was that East Side area with the pockets of all different kind of thing. But you get people to confuse this, and they always say Black Bottom was full of music, and it's like, no, sociologically doing this thing, and so laying it out like that was interesting. And then I did all my writing. I know where part of the neighborhood people came from. Now, Hastings Street, which everybody likes, and Hooker made famous, recording in 48 and got it on the charts in 49, Boogie Chillin' that we were talking about, is that when he sang, first time I came to town, I was walking down Hastings Street. I went in Henry's Swing Club. Where's Henry? Fred, you got the ad?
Yeah,
There's the ad right here from the paper. Now, it sounds great because we know in literature, let you borrow a lot and then you get the titles cool, right? So, but Henry's Swing Club wasn't on Hastings Street like Fred said. But it sounded cool, right? So here's the ad from 1946. Henry's Swing Club featuring Calvin Frazier. Fred can talk about him in a minute. The really fine blues electric guitar, it says, by Calvin Frazier. And so anyway, that was on Orleans at Madison. So but for the poetic license, it's like Hemingway didn't use Two-Hearted River and not the Fox River. You know what I mean? It was like the title was cooler, so grab the. You don't blame them. These are creative people. It sounds great in the song, right? But everything wasn't on. All blues wasn't on Hastings Street. It had bars that had taverns. They would call them even would have blues at times, running north and south. A bar might just scrawl tonight is. Calvin Frazier or Baby Boy Warren or something. And then that would be it. It's just like when Fred's been out there, when you go and hustle with your band, you go in the bar and say, "What do you got?" Yeah. "Well, I'll give you this weekend." But it wasn't a blues bar. There weren't any solid, like Soup Kitchen Saloon I played years later. There weren't the places that had solid music were like jump blues places again on Hastings Street. Sport Tree Reed's bar would have T-Bone Walker came through Detroit a lot. So T-Bone might be playing there, and Big Joe Turner might have a gig there. Local jump, singers. So, and that had a kind of a floor show too, and an MC. It was like whatever. The difference between all this is that in 1949, there was an instance when Hooker went to go try out on the new strip by the late 40s, early 50s was John R. So it was moving from out there, and a lot of the jazz was moving out towards John R. to the Flame. And John Lee Hooker tried out in 49 and didn't make the audition.
Oh, jeez.
Well, he did. So the paper said that it was good, but offerings were too sad. It just didn't fit into their show. Okay, so that was a difference between the rougher, down-home blues and the more refined. I mean, Johnny Ray sang there, and it was cool, but it was review show stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you had these pockets of different music, and then sometimes bebop would find its way in some of these smaller clubs. But Sonny Wilson's bar was complex. Was an old entertainment corner big complex. Was at Forest and Hastings, the Forest Club, and he had that again 41 to 51. He didn't own it; he leased it. He had a 107-foot bar made. And the book that we have, we found the picture, and it's just the people in the wartime are just lined up. And there were all these women back behind the bar just to clean glasses. And the money, everybody's dressed up. You didn't go out to these places without, you borrow clothes if you had to from your buddy. Everybody's working. So that bar was really cool. And he had in the roller rink, he'd have roller rink and all the kids were at the roller rink, but he would double as his performance hall. So then he'd get all of his wooden chairs out and have a dance floor, and then he'd have like Al Hibbler. He had even Dizzy played there. Gillespie played there once. He had Louis Jordan, in the 43 riot, Louis Jordan's scheduled as playing that night in June of 43 in that disaster. So I looked up all the bands that played there. They were cool. He had like, in that room, he brought from St. Louis, he brought the old piano player he bought, I'll think of it in a minute. But some of these groups were there. Jay McShann was one of them, the Jump stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll think of it in a minute, but so that the whole area of that old East Side at that time, up until it started fading away and moving to John R. and the housing stock was fading out before 59 when they started, actual demolition for urban renewal. It was going farther down and things moved out towards like Oakland Avenue. When Hooker would play at the Apex out on Oakland, there were some clubs along Jefferson. So I saw it climbing out. You could see it, So that's the big basic overview of the blues, jump blues, of how it existed. But then we had on those off streets, there was probably just as much going on probably for blues as there were house parties.
Right.
Now,
during that time period too, wasn't there also wasn't that when Chicago was really coming through as a regular, we were feeding Chicago and Toronto back and forth for blues things, especially Chicago.
A lot of the Detroit blues guys would go to Chicago to record.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I remember the route was starting to really build.
Yeah, I mean Chicago had the more had more number of players, but like Fred, let Fred tell you about Boogie Woogie Red playing with Sonny Boy Williamson. Rice Miller he'd get about bored down there and wander his way up here, hang out for a while. So you can tell him about the great Sonny Boy hanging out with
Baby Boy, basically.
Baby Boy.
That was his friend.
Yeah.
Baby Boy Warren.
And they made those sides together.
Oh yeah, bunch of sides.
Yeah, they're good.
I mean, at the time, I don't know, some blues show when I was living in Ann Arbor said, I don't know if it was Joe Taboni or whoever it was, said that when that band was together in 1954, you had Baby Boy Warren on rhythm guitar and vocals, Calvin Frazier on lead, Boogie Woogie Red on piano, Sonny Boy Williamson on harmonica, and Washboard Willie on washboard.
And I don't think that Boogie Woogie Red was bragging when he said that was probably the best group.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it sounds like it was. That was like our equivalent to the Muddy Waters Wrecking Gang,
Yeah.
Right.
And where was that recorded at?
Well, that was in Detroit.
Okay.
That was.
That was done, but it was done in Michigan.
Actually, it could have been in Chicago. But I was thinking, at first, I was thinking of Fortune.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't really think it was that Fortune.
Okay.
Yeah, they have some of that stuff was on that one compilation of Detroit.
Well, I have it, but
I was looking
forget right now.
I know it was that one called. Well, anyway, I'm looking at your.
Well, Maddie May, and
Yeah.
that's one of the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they became more popular and more collectible because Sonny Boy Williamson is on it.
He's definitely the one that would probably have made the.
Well, he
biggest
was a
name for
friend
himself,
of
yeah.
Baby Boy Warren, and Eddie Burns told me once. He said, "Oh, Sonny Boy, you just couldn't believe him. He had come to a vacant lot in Detroit, and the neighbor would let him plug in his amp into their socket,
Mm-hmm.
and he would have a long cord, and he would just play his harmonica, and within a half hour, that whole space would be packed with people."
Oh. Wow.
Yeah, Fred, you wrote here that group recorded 2 of the songs for JVB. So
JV, okay, it was Joe Van Battle,
which we
right.
can talk to. We'll lead into Joe here.
Yeah.
Which is real help because now we're still on Hastings Street, and one of the blues center in Hastings Street, not so much a bar as was a record store and recording studio in the back, right? So JVB. Do you have any JVB records, Fred?
No.
No, they're pretty rare.
If I If I had one, I'd probably sell it because they're worth money. Sorry.
That's where we know most of Fred's good records are. They're sold somewhere.
Well, we were just we had a couple talks lately, and they went on forever. And JVB is the label. If you ever find one, the 78 pile, yeah, you've got something to hold on to.
JBB 78s.
Well, he also did the whole C.L. Franklin, which is on chess.
Okay.
But Joe Von Battle recorded it all.
Right.
Originally.
JVB.
Yeah.
JVB. Okay.
Right.
Matter of fact, Aretha Franklin, as a young teenager, is on an early cut of her father's.
Yeah, that was her first recording, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Well, there's some famous photographs of John Lee Hooker in front of Joe's record
Right.
shop.
Yeah.
With little Sonny.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's the big, in my article that I have, should have brought with me. There's that famous front picture of the front of the record shop with recordings by C.L. Franklin.
Right.
Yeah, and those were those series. So it was a series. You
Oh,
kept
wow.
buying, put
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4,
Oh,
flip it
cool.
over, and, there's sermons.
Sermons.
Right. So it was a series of sermons. And that sold for him better than any of that
Oh,
stuff.
jeez.
Yeah. So the record store was in that Michigan Chronicle, and there was a picture in there of people shopping, and it looked like he made the same wooden, partitions that you get in any college record store, and there's posters. But like I said, Michigan Chronicle would often have an article about him to update the readers, because it was kind of like the bellwether of what the taste was at the time on the East Side. And he would list like what was the best selling record for that month or whatever. I think 43 was Straighten Up by Fly-Right by Nat King Cole. He loved that stuff too, but I could tell his heart was in the old blues stuff.
Right.
Because we were just
Who did the charts that he was reporting to?
Oh, a reporter would just
A reporter,
Yeah,
okay.
a reporter just wrote an article, and he would rap out what sold best at the store.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's a precursor to all the big billboards
Right.
and whatever else,
Right.
CKLW or whatever radio stations.
And that's why we kind of know what was going on, because if not, here's a little piece from the Chronicle. Joe Von Battle lends aid to battle for the blues, I guess. September 18th, 48. Blues outsells all our records 10-1. And he's talking about how blues have more feeling, and it's that, you need a story. And blues are about a story. And he says, blues tell a story. And he's saying he's got the largest store and all that, and that's all cool. And in 1948, the best-selling record, secular record, is Ivy Jo Hunter is his bestseller. The best women's seller in town is Dinah Washington. So it was cool to see that, because you wouldn't know it. That was what was great, that I could find those little pieces.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So he was recording Hooker in the back room, and others, just like, the group we just mentioned. And if you find those are fun. But he...
I had heard, do you ever know of a guy by the name of, out of Chicago, George Paulus?
Yep, I met George.
Yeah, me too.
He has...
I sold him some records. But anyways, I had read in one of the early blues magazines that he went to JVB and Joe let him in the back room, and he got a lot, like a car full of 78s.
And that would have been when Joe...
Brand new,
Yeah, he wasn't old enough for Hastings, but he would have went to 12th Street when Joe moved to 12th.
Oh, yeah, probably.
Yeah. So he would have hauled all that over to 12th Street. Joe moved from Hastings Street when it was gone, and then over 12th Street.
Okay.
So that
Boy,
he could...
78s were heavy.
That'd be a hell of a move.
I don't know what help he got, but yeah, so that was a center, for recording and hangout place. Record stores are always good hangout spots, talk or whatever. So that was kind of fun. So Joe Von Bell is one of those guys from the street, and there was a...
Our listeners got to know too. This is pre-Motown, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
So
no.
Well, speaking of Motown, did you know Al Abrams by any chance, John?
No.
He was the first employee of Motown. I got to know Al pretty well, and when he was a young guy, he used to walk over to now Al is Jewish, but he would walk to Joe's record shop, and that's where he bought his earliest R&B records.
Yeah. The thing about Joe loved blues, and I don't think Berry Gordy did not. You know, it wasn't his favorite music, but Joe liked that rough down home stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's why he's got Hooker in the back room there. It's got some grit to it.
And Kelvin Frazier and Baby Boy and all these, and those are some of the finest names of the Detroit guys. You know, and so. But there was and people are familiar with it. It'd be great if you could dig the tune up. Would be Detroit Counts Hastings Street Opera.
Yeah.
Yep, there you go. So, and that one, if you listen to it, a lot of people we just talked about are in the rap. It's like a piano, kind of a vaudevillian, you know, it's slow kind of playing and rapping. You know,
That may be my album of the week tomorrow.
Nice.
yeah. And then he goes up and down the street in the tune,
Right.
and you will walk into Sonny Wilson's. You know, the longest bar in town, you know, and then he talk about the next bar, and then a lot of them he doesn't talk about music so much as like, don't go in that one, old folks home, you know. One is they'll cut you before you get out of that one.
Oh,
you know?
Jesus.
So it's really cool, and so Detroit, it was Bob White, but Detroit Count came out with that number, and that's that would be cool. Linked up with that.
Well,
He died working. When he died, he was penniless, and he was working at a car wash.
now wasn't that called talking blues?
Yeah.
That style?
Yeah.
Because nobody used, rap, for example.
No,
Right.
we're just talking about rapping it out. You know, I mean,
Right.
he's rapping it in
Detroit or Hastings Street Opera. Parts 1 and 2.
Yeah. I mean, it's all talking.
It's probably on YouTube, huh?
Probably.
Probably. Yeah. I mean, so before there was rap, we'd say he's just rapping in another sense. You know what I mean? Like Louis Jordan doing all of his spiels. So, yeah, in fact, it was all, I had it transcribed somewhere, but it was about a lot of the places that we were just mentioned are in it, and it'd be fun to hear it. Like Fred said, some speculate that he died homeless, but I only heard that on the street. I can't.
We'll slip that song in here somehow.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm editing this spot out, but
Yeah,
it's my little edit mark. But yeah, we'll plug it.
that'd be cool.
That should be old enough where we got some clearance.
Oh my God!
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know who's coming after for that one. You know, and I think that was 48. So it's really funny the stuff that we're talking about today it's happening from the mid 40s to like to 1950. It's falling that way, you know. And that tune came out in that window, window too. So he's talking about post-war Hastings Street.
No, as a writer, man, this is like you did your thesis and you're diving into this. You said you were not playing music anymore. Did it just like become a goal from that point on? You're going to start writing and digging. You were finding truth. You were digging up every nuance of truth because you were starting to find the edges. What drove you to that? Was it just getting hooked up with these people, or what was your edge in on all this in the 90s?
And I graduated in masters in American history, so I wanted it to be as accurate as I could be. I didn't want it, and with Sonny, he died in '99. They brought him to the Ann Arbor Blues Festival, and my friend got him to be the honorary person for that for '99, I think it was. But this is what's bad about it. We got it half done, and all of a sudden I get a call from his daughter. He lived in Detroit. Well, Dad's got polyps on his throat, and he can't talk, and I don't know if he ever will again. Well, the book was half done, and when you do a memoir with a man that's that old, you want him to say, "Well, I was born in South Carolina in that date." That's not how it works. All of a sudden he comes out of there, and I want to get his early days, and he gets a picture of Jackie Gleason with him at the Forest Club, and he goes, here's Jackie, he was my friend. I didn't know that. There's a picture of Jackie Gleason with him. Now I saw him on TV, I got thinking about him. I want to talk about Jackie Gleason. So I had to put it in the 50s and store it away in this folder.
Yeah.
So I had it all over the place. I had a little bit of the early days. I had Hastings Street when he first got there. what it was like to be on a street dominated. He was one of the, few black men on it. There had been Cozy Corner before that in the 30s, but there weren't a lot of black entrepreneurs. But so he talked about getting on the street and getting that financing for that Forest Club. So now I'm like, oh no, it can't be anything. What am I going to do? Just put it in pieces and parts. Well, he recouped. He goes, my throat's not very good, but we're going to get this done. And so every Friday I would go down to Detroit with him on Congress Street, eat late lunch with him and sit there forever. He wouldn't talk until he ate.
Oh, yeah? You had to buy him lunch?
No, he bought me. I
Oh.
wasn't even making any money. He would give me a little money for gas, dude. I was like, and my wife was like going to kill me, And back then when I called him, we talked like Fred, man. And it would be like, did you get the bill again? And it wasn't like today, what I mean? Yeah, so it was like, and we go back to his apartment generally, and then we'd settle down, and he would talk for a couple hours. Give me 2 pictures to take home. He'd tons of pictures, and because people stole so many of them. With me, he goes, I'll give you 2, you bring them back, I'll give you 2 more.
Oh.
Well, it was smart, really.
Yeah.
So it was cool, but that took 4 years to do because then he wouldn't feel good, and then he would be like that. But the throat came back. That took a while. But anyway, he got it all together, and we finally, he didn't want to end it. And I go, Mr. Wilson, we have to end this thing. It's like, gotta end it. Wayne State's got it. Wayne State Press put it out. We have a deadline. So, and there were pictures I found later. Oh, God,
Oh, yeah.
Well, see, like, look at an example. This is in Paradise Valley. Werner, Iowa, was a little piece of it. And he had the Brown Bomber chicken shack. Joe and his trainers put up the money. It's called Brown Bomber's Chicken Shack. He was the manager. But he had all these great pictures inside the place, with these waiters with their, with the white outfits on and the towels over their arm. And I went, oh. And he goes, I just found this one.
Oh.
Yeah, but it was cool. So we found enough because it's got good pictures in the book. We located enough and we got it. But we finally got it done. And then this Historical Society of Michigan gave it the book of the year in 98 when it came out. And then it was on the Michigan Reads list in 99. So we did all right. And then he died. Yeah, not long after. By the time he got to Ann Arbor, he was just weak as like getting almost down to nothing. So we're lucky we got it in because he knew all these people. And get back to what you're saying is, it's like it's reliable because so many people have jumped on the bandwagon trying to write about Hastings Street. And now then I read it and I go,
nope.
No, and there just isn't. The people were dying, and even when we were doing it, it was like, well, we were going to see so-and-so, but he's dead. We're even going to go see Coleman Young because he knew him well, just because, we could get some stuff about him, hanging out too. No, it was like, all the Joe Louis Circle guys were gone. So he was the last of the young guy that knew them. And it's really, you don't want to get something that was like Uncle Larry said, I think.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Yeah, you
sure,
don't, it's not the same.
No.
It's not the same. So with me, it's his story. I put it together. And I had to put the whole thing together. I did the best I can with the first complete book that I did. And then, after that, I wrote more on music sporadically, and then I went into literature. But it's all art. And that's why I did, like you were asking earlier, why'd you do Jack Kerouac in Detroit? Because I got into all that, too.
Yeah.
And so Jack Kerouac got married real quickly in New York and stayed here briefly in Grosse Pointe Park. We don't have the time for the story.
No, you could say, this is part of the culture, man.
Yeah, but
for sure.
Here's what we want to do. Jack Kerouac married Edie Parker and lived for a brief time in Grosse Pointe Park. But she took him down because they love music, and she wanted to take him where the music was, so she took him to Hastings Street. So this is what basically this little paragraph about Jack in Detroit about music. Let's say Jack made the best of his visit. Edie, now 27, was taken up. Now he revisited her after he left in 44, and he came back and found her because he get lonesome. He wanted to visit her. She took him to Hastings Street, and he said Kerouac considered some of her friends he didn't quite alike. In the afternoons, they rode back the back of her teenage friend's car's open rumble seat, looking at Werner's ginger ale and the moppy clouds of afternoon among the red brick factories. That's Jack in quote, of course, Sharing his passion for jazz, Edie took Kerouac, and Cassidy's with him on this adventure, and 2 other friends to Hastings Street, Detroit's legendary thoroughfare of black business and nighttime entertainment. They watched a group perform on a small elevated stage. Quote, down in Hastings Street, the boys were blowing, wrote Kerouac. The baritone blew and rocked his big horn on a fast blues. So while watching Edie's spirited response to the music, Kerouac felt for a brief moment a glimmer of their past days together. And then they left and went on, and I don't think he ever saw her again. But that's what people said. Now, who was the baritone player? Who would we know? The Barry guy could have been named a couple of guys, or Barry Place. But we'll never know. But that's what I'm saying is it led me to like anything about Detroit that's super cool like that. You know what I mean? I kind of find it pieces and parts. You know what I mean? And I thought it was cool writing this little piece about Jack, which we can talk to the end, the winter of his discontent. It's about his visit and his short stay. But as long, so I knew about Hastings Street, so it's like cool. I got to put that's like golden little nugget. Find, you know what I mean?
Right.
So you find that stuff but anyway, and then for Gale Research, I wrote for contemporary black biography and contemporary musicians, and they were running out of. They'd give you this suggested list, and it was like, well, no, not him, no, and I was running out of jazz guys, so they didn't care that I could do all the Detroit guys too. See, so I did the blues guys the more that I could, even the national guys. But then I went and did Yusef Lateef and Elvin Jones and Hank Jones and Thad Jones and Tommy Flanagan and Paul Chambers even. And it was funny, one time I got back the kit. We've had some poor writing, and I don't mean to say this big-headed. I just want to think this is really funny for the Paul Chambers one. They sent back a kit saying, here's an example of how these essays should be written. And I opened it up, and it's my Paul Chambers.
my own example of me.
And what was funny too is not so much I'm bringing about myself. It's like I don't think 90% of the college graduates writing about this culture stuff even knew who he was. You know what I mean? They don't know Mr. PC, but it was cool. So I thought it was funny that they chose Paul Chambers and I'm like, cool. And then when I would go see all these guys, I'd take my article and they'd sign it. And Yusef signed it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, Kenny Burrell was really nice. When he found out at Baker's I was writing Sonny's book, he's like, yes. He's very, very serious man. Yes, what would you like? Sonny Wilson says hello. Kenny Burrell stops at Baker's and turns around and everything's doing smiles. He goes, you tell that man hello. Well, he's writing a book. Would you like to write a cover quote? And he gave me this beautiful cover quote that he sent, handwritten. I still have it.
Oh my gosh.
From Kenny Burrell.
Oh my
So
Lord.
that's why I know Sonny knew all these people, but that's the musicians. See, Sonny, to add one more story about him, not only did he have the Forest Club, what was great about him in the book is he had the Mark Twain Hotel. It wasn't any great hotel. I think it was like 6 stories. It was on 52 Garfield, right off of Woodward. But what was great about the hotel is like all the musicians would stay there because it wasn't that expensive, and he let them skip. So I guess when B.B. King came to town, after 3 o'clock blues, he wanted to bring the whole horns and everything with him on the bus, but didn't really have the money. So when they got there, they all stayed at the hotel, and they ran out of money, and the bus broke down, and Sonny didn't charge them.
No.
He found a way. He probably got money from other. Sonny knew a lot of people. So B.B. loved him after that. You know what I mean? Then he was cool. So T-Bone Walker would stay at the hotel. Now, the Gotham Hotel by John White up the road, that was built in the 20s, and that was where it was a pretty fine black-owned hotel, but that's where Billie Holiday would stay, and Duke Ellington. Duke would come over to his place, but all the sidemen stayed at Sonny's place.
Oh.
Right. And then I met James Moody, and he hugged me and hugged Sonny, and he hugged me. He goes, Sonny's best. I stayed at his place all the time. So I know this was all true.
Yeah.
So Sonny was like the entrepreneur that loved music, so he would help all these guys.
Wow.
And there was one time, speaking of blues again, he said T-Bone was staying at the hotel, and Sister Rosetta Tharpe and a couple other people. And on Sunday morning, when they were going to do their various Easter services, they were going off to do church gigs and stuff before outside of their. He said they set up in his entryway down to the hotel, and he said, I wish I had a microphone, because it was Sister Rosetta Tharpe and T-Bone and the others that were there. They all sang harmony, and T-Bone's playing guitar. He says it was just fantastic.
One of those moments, magic moments in the
Right.
ethers there.
Right, what you wanted to be there.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
That's the problem with me. It's like even in the Michigan music that people saw in the 60s and 70s, I grew up graduated in 80, so I missed about everything. That to me, almost everything was in the past, which is a bummer for me. Sonny's was the real distant past, and then when in the 60s, I wasn't old enough to go see all the other stuff. So to me, the only drag is I'm always looking backwards.
Yeah.
Historically with me, the stuff that I like, all the way up into, there's a certain point in the 60s and 70s. But, well, that's what made the history part good. I haven't written on that stuff a long time, and I love it. And that's why visiting with Fred is like great, because I can bring it all back and and then I went back and got all these notes out, and it's like it's like part of my reason why I just like the area in Detroit.
That was the start of it.
Yeah, and I write on other things like on Hemingway up north and stuff like that. That's a whole nother world, but the music stuff was great to do. I think that on that stuff I've written enough on it that I've satisfied myself. People come from LA and they sit down with me. One guy did, and we were talked about that earlier. These guys that are like drive-by guys that want to come in and be hip and want to write about Detroit. And the guy sits down and goes, well, I'm going to call this Black Bottom and whatever, and I'm going to have all the nightclubs. I go, but they're not in Black Bottom. Why would you do it? And I didn't like that because that's what I'm giving my publisher. But I'm going to make a documentary, and we're going to do this and stuff like that. You're not going to find any more pictures. And I read your stuff, and I said, well, go to the newspaper. I've already gleaned the news. There's no more there, and everybody's dead. But if you want to find more, well, I'm going to do this. And I'm like, okay, and I'm like, fine, and it's like they get it and go out, and I never hear of them again,
Yeah.
And I don't know. Detroit,
it's the shooting star mentality from LA out there.
Yeah, now Detroit's hip and stuff.
Yeah.
But one time, Sonny's book, I'll leave you on this, and this was a cool thing about how Detroit music is kind of cool outside of our environs, is that I wrote a book about American culture rebels, about the avant-garde in America and all that. It's another whole world and story. Jazz is in there and everything else. But when my friend gave the Sonny Wilson book to a friend of his out in Seattle. He was part of my friend I grew up with had a nightclub, and he gave it to Ben Sheppard of Soundgarden. He goes, you know who likes your book? I gave it to him after it. I go, no. Ben likes it. Ben who? Ben Sheppard of Soundgarden. So I went out to Seattle. I was hanging out, and they go, Ben wants to go out and meet you.
Oh.
And I'm like at his nightclub, and I'm sitting there, and Ben comes, I don't know him. I only knew Black Hole Sun.
And he's the bass player.
Yeah, right. Right. No, but he was like, real tough guy. And he's like, I like your music from there, man, And they're like, yeah. He goes, I like that book. He goes, you want to go drink? You want to go to a bar? I'm like, yeah. Went to 7 bars, and he bought. And at the end, I was so wasted, I didn't drive. I said, here's the money, buy Ben and anybody else drinks, But he didn't talk a lot, but he's like going, I like that whole thing. Detroit's cool. I like you guys. And I'm like going, yeah, we like Seattle. We had a lot of respect.
Wonderful.
So when I had another talk one time about the Rebels book, I warmed up for a rock thing, and it worked. They were like, they wanted to hear about Detroit, So we get a lot of kudos out there. The grunge guys, cool. Yeah, the grunge guys liked all the rough stuff.
Yeah, Ben did a project in the '90s, and I got the CD. It's called Heater.
Okay,
and it's very rough Detroit-based kind of album, so that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That's cool. That tied right in with it.
So the Sonny Wilson book actually got me an introduction to some of those guys out there.
That scene, yeah.
Yeah. So it was hit, and it showed them that there's a lot of interest in us, because Seattle had they weren't. They had the Boeing plant and everybody and all that other stuff.
Well, Hendrix and
all that. Right. And they like, a lot of, we don't go on all the 60s name, but they know all about it. Yeah. So it was cool. So,
well, when you were doing your jazz thing, I mean, you kind of skipped over it fast, but tell me a little bit like the Yusef stuff, what he signed for you, and dive a little bit into that for us.
Yeah, well, with that, it was just one of the articles, but he was at at Montrose, so I just went down there. Instead of getting the CD, I had my article. He looked up and he says, well, that's really wonderful, He wrote a memoir, but to be honest with you, I loaned it to somebody. He didn't bring it back to me. It's not really well written, and it didn't get any fact check. So he was real old at the time, and I called him up asking him about some other stuff, and he said, well, and I talked to him on the phone, and he says, he just kind of went, well, I went, if you said what you'd like to say, he said, yeah, that's basically it. And so he didn't want to add anything to it. That was all right, but I know some stuff about his past now that I'd laugh because I would never say it to him. We were just talking about that east side, you know, and around Hastings Street. He played in the early 50s with a guy named Floyd Taylor. He was a bluesy piano player, but they're playing for a female impersonator show. And who's in the gig on the article in the American Chronicle is Yusef Lateef is part of the group. I don't think that was a high point of his.
No, that's the most side money. Side money.
Well, no, this is like ties back into like that scene was like the East Side scene was like you could go see female impersonator show. Right. I mean, you know, so that was another weird like little off, you know.
How did you say it earlier that we that was playing piano for some different guys or something?
Right. Oh yeah, Floyd said in the Paul Oliver interview, he says, well, I played for some he didn't mean it bad. He didn't know how to say it. He says some funny fellers.
Funny fellers.
Something like that. Yeah. So you know, it wasn't. You said it's not going to be like, hey, do you remember when? No, I didn't even know it then. But see, and I would meet him, and then Kenny signed my thing, and Elvin Jones did because I was born in Pontiac, and when Keiko, his wife, said, "You're from Pontiac," and I said, "Yeah," she goes, "Hold on. Elvin, sign this now." Yeah, see, so, you know, because he was born there. So I did an article on my own for Oakland University, had an Oakland Journal for alumni, alumnus, and people, professors on staff, but you could write for it if you were a graduate. So I did Elvin Jones' Detroit years, and that was then the only thing about that. Well, see, I'm from Pontiac, and I live right down the street where he grew up, so I knew the house.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, and I missed all these old guys going, we used to sit on the porch and listen to him in Pontiac on Monday night. So that's where that all kind of, you had to get to it.
And I know in the recent, and not to change the subject, it's the same subject, but like there's a Coltrane bootleg from Detroit that came out from the little club he played at on a whim that somebody recorded that just got released not too long ago. Yeah. And I was with Elvin and
well, Elvin played at the Bluebird.
And the Bluebird? Okay.
Yeah. And Bluebird, I don't know if Fred ever went there, but I went there before its demise. And I went there when it had the last Clarence Edens' wife, Mary, and one of my friends put together the last shows, and they tried to bring back people from the 50s, and the neighborhood was not good out there in Tyreman and that, in Beechwood. But it was still going, and they had the mural on the back, and they had the stage, and I saw Charles McPherson there, and I saw Tommy Flanagan, Jimmy Smith, and they all played there. They were barely making any money. Yeah, now it's all hollowed out, but the jazz society's got a hold of it, I think. But so I got to see like the tiny vestige of the last of the because that was the bebop.
Was Cannonball Elderly from Detroit too?
No, he's from Florida.
Yeah, that place was just bought by the Detroit Conservatory of.
That's it.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
I gave all my interviews to them.
Okay. All right.
That they can't use.
And Wayne State now hosts all the archives from Ann Arbor too. Didn't Michigan U of M go give all their stuff to Wayne State? Isn't that where
really?
Didn't we talk about that on our episode?
Because John Sinclair, I saw all his stuff. He gave all his films and whatever, tapes he had to University of Michigan.
Was it at the Bentley?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I saw it sitting there, and I'm going, "Wow!"
Yeah, the Bentley has got all Al Abrams, materials, as well as I think who's the guy that did A Square Records? Jeep Holland. Jeep Holland's stuff is all at the Bentley too. That's really a fun place to go, and you have to put on the white gloves and.
Oh Lord! Wow.
Yes.
Actually, the story I was mentioning was, Fred, you brought up, you had the article you read in Ann Arbor. I was trying to look it up online, and I couldn't find it. Andrew Rogers was saying something about how all the archives got moved.
Oh, that one, yeah.
And didn't it go to Wayne State? Is that what he said?
I think so, yeah.
That was the
From
one.
the art.
Yeah.
Yeah, the early
Yep.
recordings.
All
Right.
that stuff, yeah. So the Wayne States and Detroit area is starting to really beef up on the history parts. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's why they wanted my thesis too, because they said there's a lot of, they're beefing that up, like you said. And I was
Wow.
happy to do that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so it's good to know that even I didn't know all this stuff, so I've been kind of out of the loop. But yeah, so I didn't make any money on all that. It's stuff to share. I mean, I'm just glad to be here to talk about it because, be honest with you, it's great stuff to us, and we love it. But it's out of the loop for most people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. I like what I like, and
Oh, yeah.
we love what we love, and we do it.
No, the historians are the ones that keep it alive, and it's only there because of that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, those guys are long gone. So.
Yeah, and it was hard to, I'm glad to be able to get to Sonny and some of the other people, like when Fred talked to these guys, it's like, it wasn't enough, but it's enough to tell a story and get enough background to it, because I do get a lot of people, and I've seen a lot of stuff they've shown me, and I get real disappointed. And I drive down 75 and I say Hastings Street play, and I'm fine. I don't know anything about it. I just wondered, nobody ever called me. I hope they are basing it upon something that's like, so many people trying to capitalize on it.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote, John Sinclair and I both wrote, I did volume 1, John did 2, and it was funny because we sat in Ann Arbor and go, I wrote your liner notes and I liked them. I said, and I did number 2, I'm just getting done. It was Hastings Street Grease, out of these guys out of Ohio. So again, it was Hastings Street, you know what I mean? But you could only use it so many times, you know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. And people were using it for this title and that title and that title. And then it's getting to the point where that's why that guy wanted to call his Black Bottom, because
It's because it's cool.
It's because it's cool.
Yeah.
And I thought, like, well, you can only use Motown so many times and stuff like that. But
And that'll put a wrap to episode 1 with Mr. John Cohassey, one of the finest authors to come out of Michigan and tell the whole backstory of the blues, Detroit, the jazz, and the actual scene from back in the day. We hope you join us for episode 2 coming up here in 2 weeks on the MMHP and the 989. And from all of us here at the podcast, we want to thank you all for tuning in and giving this a listen. Check out all of our other episodes. We have quite the backlog here for the past 3 seasons. And again, we'd like to thank Mr. John Cohassey. Part 2 will be coming up next in 2 weeks. Thank you.
The MMHP is hosted on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and our own Libsyn podcast site. You can also search MMHP989 on Facebook for up-to-the-minute information, as well as both Dr. J and Sir Fred's album picks of the week, posted every weekend. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com. Brought to you by Michigan Rock and Roll Legends, located both inside the Bay County Historical Museum on Washington Avenue, as well as Scotty's Sandbar on Evergreen Drive at the Bay City Middle Grounds.
On behalf of the hosts, Gary, Dr. J. Johnson, Sir Fred Rife, archivist and videographer Mike Beatty, and myself, this podcast wouldn't be here without Studio 163's Alan Garcia, the voice of MMHP, Mr. Eddie Switek, all of our guests, and you, the listeners.
You've been listening to the MMHP and the 989. From all